Today's episode of Beyond the Mask is presented by the insurance specialists at Bright Think Wealth Strategies. Find the disability insurance coverage that fits you best right now. Email Robert Smith at rsmithjr@financialguide.com. The show is also made possible by the team at CRNA Financial Planning. Get a free consultation today to be guided through the complexities of investing and financial planning. Just visit crnafinancialplanning.com. We'd also like to thank Helping Hands and OSA EMR for their support of the show. And don't forget, listening to our podcast can earn you Class B credits. For more information on how you can submit them, check out the CE Credit tab on our website, beyondthemaskpodcast.com. Welcome to Beyond the Mask, Innovation and Opportunities for CRNAs, with Jeremy Stanley and Sharon Pierce. We know you spend your day caring for your patient's best interests. On our show, we want to care for you. Join us as we leave the operating room and learn the latest in the CRNA industry. Beyond the Mask starts in 10, 9, 8, 7.
Welcome to Beyond the Mask. I'm Jeremy Stanley, and I've been working with CRNAs for over 23 years, and I'm married to one. And my co-host is
Sharon Pierce.
Sharon's a practicing CRNA for over 20 years, a past president of the ANA, the NCANA, and she's held many other leadership roles. As usual, our goal with every episode is to educate and enlighten CRNAs, and I think our topic today is definitely going to do that. And Sharon, what time is it?
It's time to wake up, Jeremy.
I think it is. Well, Sharon, the Windy City.
Here we are.
I know.
It is windy. I just walked out and
windy.
my name badge about hung me.
I know. I'm digging the weather, though, here at the ANA Annual Congress. Much better than the hundreds we've seen at home over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, my God. It feels so good out there.
It does. It does. Well, we're excited to be here taping live again in Chicago at
That's
ANA Annual Congress.
Best part.
Yeah. And we have another guest that I think is very near and dear to your heart.
It is. It's my brother by another mother.
I've heard you say that on several occasions.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have with us today Mr. Jerry Hogan. Welcome, Jerry.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So you two went to anesthesia school together at the Wake Forest Baptist program.
We sure did.
Just a few moons ago.
Yeah, well, that was like last week.
Yeah, exactly.
It does feel like it was last week, but we both know that in a couple of weeks we will have 30 years.
30 years. 1992 we graduated.
Isn't that crazy? And it goes by
just like that.
You know, I was talking to one of my best friends from high school. We still keep in touch, and we don't talk like we used to, but he was telling me the other day that him and his wife are going to have been married for 28 years. Mm-hmm. And I thought, 28 years? Are you that old? Because I'm not.
No, it freaks you out. Well, Jerry and his wife got married the same year that Pierce and I did.
A week apart.
Wow. And our children were born the same years. Our oldest children were born in 85, and our youngest were born in 87.
That is crazy. Huh. You really are sort of intertwined in this universe, aren't you?
We sure are. And my
husband,
my husband fell in love with his wife immediately.
They're like two peas in a pod, too.
Yep, and they are still just like that. And her name is uttered in our home every single day.
I wasn't sure where you were going with that,
well,
so I'm glad you clarified that for us.
Let me tell you why it's uttered in our house every single day. Because whenever Kim Hogan is drinking a little bit, she has a certain walk that she does when she's in high heels, and Peanut has the same walk.
Every time they see the dog walk, it reminds them of my wife. So I'm not sure how I'm supposed to take that.
I'm not sure how to take that one either, to be honest.
Kim loves it, though. But every day, whenever Peanut's walking, we'll go, Kim Hogan.
Nice to be known. Huh?
It's spoken out of pure love, for sure.
All right, Jerry. Well, you wrote an article not too long ago, and but before we get into that, we're going to talk about that today. We're going to be talking about moral injury and nurse anesthesiology. But just real quick for our listeners who might not know your background and who you are, just kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I am obviously a CRNA, been for 30 years. I am also a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. Have worked in both arenas, doing some now ketamine and some ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, in addition to working as a CRNA, and then also teaching at Florida State University in their nurse anesthesia program.
Do you know of another CRNA that's a psych?
Yeah, there's
MP?
a couple.
There's a couple.
Nicole Rice.
Okay.
And there's a couple that are in school. I know Katie Walker.
Okay.
Finished her psych NP. So mine was just, it was a really weird set of circumstances. I did 2 tours in Afghanistan in the Air Force. And at the end of my second tour, I saw the PTSD symptoms in myself, and I was able to at least realize the fact that I was struggling.
Yeah, who else saw?
Hey, you did. And that I was struggling. I was angry. I had a lot of issues. They mandated, because of the suicide rate being as high as it was, and
continues,
and it continues. They mandated us to go to counseling, and so it was a civilian contract licensed mental health counselor that I saw. And I would go in and talk to her, and I would come out of there more angry than when I went in, because everything was like, oh, yeah, I hear that all the time. Oh, yeah, that's not uncommon. So everything that I said kind of got trivialized.
Right.
And so then I thought, what am I even bothering talking to? So it was a waste of my time, a complete waste of my time. And then I said to myself, I could do this better. So then I started looking, and I had my post 9/11 GI Bill money. Couldn't give it to anybody. So I just said, well, I might go back and
use it myself.
And so I did. So it took me 3 years to get the to finish the program. But I went to Stony Brook University on Long Island, State University of New York at Stony Brook. Barbara Sprung was the program director. She was amazing. She was probably one of the main reasons why. I mean, she was great, and I learned so much there. And it was mostly all distance, done by distance. We would go up there a couple times a year, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the program and learned a lot, and am able to use it. And it was before the ketamine craze, so it was I was sort of ahead of the curve on that one.
Right.
But I just did it mainly because I just wanted to understand better why I was having so many issues and problems. And I honestly have worked through most of them. But it's interesting, and I like doing it. And I like mixing the anesthesia and the psych NP role together in with ketamine infusions and with ketamine assisted psychotherapy. And now the newest up and coming thing is the psychedelics. That's going to be a huge market in the next couple of years. There are already people that are microdosing mushrooms, things,
Really?
For depression and
Well, that'll make you feel better.
Yeah. That's another podcast talking about psychedelics, because really you're going to see a huge increase in their use in probably the next 5 years or so.
Well, they're saying the reason why we don't have any good music these days is because there's not enough psychedelics around. I mean, think about the
There you go.
60s
That's
music
true,
and the
yeah.
early 70s. Great music,
True.
but
You got
what?
into a different universe. didn't
Lucy
you?
in the Sky with Diamonds, LSD. I mean, So interesting. Well, we're here today to talk about moral injury. And I got a little bit of this whenever I was in school at Yale. But why don't you tell our listeners about moral injury?
So moral injury is a really interesting concept, because a lot of times people get it confused with burnout, and they get it confused with PTSD. So PTSD is more like an external threat. It's caused by external threats. Moral injury is kind of more like situations that directly affect your moral compass and directly affect your idea of how things are being done. And the way that affected CRNAs was that a lot of them moved out of their comfort zone, which is the operating room, and into ICU scenarios and stuff during COVID. And a lot of times there was withdrawal of care on patients who, were still alive. But, when you're looking at a finite amount of resources, sometimes you just have to make that decision that there's nothing else that's going to help. Extubating people and then just sitting and watching them die kind of goes against
Right, because we're used to people being alive.
We fix people. It's what we do.
Yeah.
And so it kind of falls along that military, after all the years I spent in the Air Force, we learned a lot about triage, right? And about how there is a classification called expectant, which means that they're not going to make it. And so you don't waste your resources on those people, because if you have a finite amount of resources, you're not going to spend them all on one person. You're going to, go for whoever has the best chance of. So we understand that in the military, we understand that concept. But I think civilians, they're just used to everything being done, and when withdrawal of care would happen, because the ICU is full, every ventilator is in use, and you have somebody that obviously is not going to make it, you say to yourself, they can't do that. They can't just, pull the plug, right? But, and so there's a lot of internal conflict that comes with that. It was originally described with medics and first responders in the military in Vietnam because of them seeing situations. And that was really where moral injury sort of started its beginnings of being, classified as a different type of psychiatric issue or condition. And so you end up with people who disagree, and with the rationing of care, and it starts to affect them to the point where they really lose interest in being in the healthcare arena anymore. And I think it has contributed to the nursing shortage and the number of nurses who just don't feel like they can continue in the profession because of the issues they dealt with during COVID.
Well, and I imagine part of this too is just the feeling of out of control, because your moral compass says I want to do this, but some other power, be it military, be it hospital administration, be it whoever, says we can't do this. And I know CRNAs well enough, and I know you two both well enough to know that, you're both laid back type B personalities. You don't want anybody, you want to be in control, and you want to do the things that you're trained to do. So I imagine that's got a lot to do with this. And if you, at your core, can't do what you're trained to do and help save people, that's got to weigh on you. And that's what, to me, this is about.
And that's very true. A lot of times the symptoms of moral injury, things like shame, guilt, disgust, like distrust in the administration and in the higher ups of where you're at, anger, anhedonia, which in psych is a lack of a desire to do anything pleasurable, right? And so it starts to mimic some depressive symptoms. You get some anxiety, some other issues. And it can even lead to suicidal ideation in some people. And so it is a serious issue, and it's something that we really haven't spent a lot of time looking at in healthcare workers, especially in CRNAs. It's been studied in first responders, but not a lot in CRNAs.
What about that nurse who wound up killing herself, the one where she overdosed the baby with heparin or whatever?
Right. So her name was Kim Hyatt. And she was in Seattle at Seattle Children's Hospital, and that was more of a second victim syndrome kind of thing.
But could it also be classified as moral injury? Because if I knew that I had caused someone's demise, that's pretty injurious to my psyche. We all go through that in one way or another. So I don't know if I'm broadening something that's not there and maybe another classification.
Well, I know every day that I work in the operating room, I have a very healthy respect for anesthesia.
Oh yeah.
I'm not cavalier at all. I'm very vigilant, and I am on my toes the whole time. And sometimes, I work with one particular circulator fairly often in the same room, and she's like, "Why don't you ever sit down? Everyone else sits down."
I don't sit either.
It's like, I can't sit down, because if I feel like I'm sitting down, I'm not paying attention. But anyway, with her, so moral injury is different from second victim in that in moral injury, you're not directly responsible for what's happening. Things are happening that are outside of your control. So as opposed to second victim syndrome, which is more like it's something that was a direct result of your actions. And that's another whole interesting subject too, is second victim syndrome. It's more prevalent than you think.
Oh,
and I think that
I think it's very prevalent.
If any CRNA ever said to me that they've never made a medication error, I would probably say,
right. How many times did you figure out you hadn't turned on the gas, and you're like, oh my? something like that. We actually...
My thing is flows. I always forget to turn down my flows.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
look over
yeah.
like
Oh,
10
same.
minutes later, and it's still at 9 liters.
Yeah, same. And we've all done it. But, one year I was chairing the NCANA state meeting, and we had Maria Van Pelt come in, not to digress to second victim, but she came in and did a whole session on second victim. And then I had, another facilitator that came in, and we broke everybody out into groups and had everybody work in groups and talk about things that had happened to them in the OR where they were the second victim. People were crying everywhere.
Oh, wow.
My
It was
gosh.
crazy. I'll never forget Terry Wicks. His incident happened 35 years ago, and it was just like it was yesterday.
Wow.
So, but I still think that there's, even though second victim, I still think this could be connected to this moral injury thing. But anyway, they didn't ask me.
So it was interesting. Shortly after the COVID pandemic, there was a Sawicki and his group did a questionnaire to about thousands and thousands and thousands of nurses, and found that up to 90% of the current nursing workforce, and this was back in March of 2022, so this is recently done, found that that up to 90% of the nursing workforce was considering leaving the profession at some point.
Oh, I
in the future.
remember hearing about that.
And I just question whether or not how much of an effect this had on that. How moral injury was a player in that decision to not do it anymore. And it's amazing to me that nurses are such resilient people anyway, and CRNAs. The stuff that people did during the pandemic, they were asked to do things that you would never imagine in a million years. But it's I think that it catches up to you, though. At least with some people. But I was fortunate in that during the pandemic, I wasn't doing a lot of clinical anesthesia. I was mostly teaching then. But I have a lot of friends that, spend a lot of time working, taking care of critically ill people, and it, it takes a toll.
But again, I think a lot of CRNA care was still episodic. I think the bedside nurse is the one that really, really suffered during this pandemic. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
No,
but
I agree.
It was still, I can't remember the particular study, but several years ago, 80% of nurses would not encourage their daughters to become nurses.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
It's a tough profession. It's a tough profession.
It really is. I mean, it's tough getting through it, and then it's tough being, a nurse, and especially a bedside nurse.
As a CRNA, you spend years preparing yourself for this career, so we don't want to see you lose out on any of the income you've worked so hard to earn. The best way to protect yourself and give you the confidence that a major life event won't disrupt your financial future is through disability insurance. We've known disability income specialist Robert Smith for many years and have seen the work he's done with nearly 2,000 CRNAs over multiple decades. He can help identify any gaps in your existing coverage and fill those gaps by finding the best value on a policy. Contact Robert and let him know you heard about him on our podcast. Send him an email at rsmithjr@financialguide.com. That's rsmithjr@financialguide.com. Or call him at 504-394-6557. Protect your greatest asset as a CRNA, yourself and your ability to earn a living by adding disability insurance to your financial plan.
So, Jerry, if someone starts to feel this strife, this moral injury, what do they do? I mean, do they diagnose themselves? Is this something that's widely known? Who do they talk to, and what happens with this?
So a lot of the time, it helps that they see someone in therapy, have a therapist that can help them to kind of sort through a lot of their things. Medication maybe, yes, could be a thought, but I think for the most part, it's sorting through the trauma and getting through that personal trauma to get better. We're very fortunate as an organization. I'm on the AANA Health and Wellness Committee, and we have so many resources for CRNAs out there that are available through AANA that could help with these sorts of things. And then, a lot of times it's finding someone who can help you work through the trauma and the kind of moral disagreement that you have with the way things are being done. Sometimes for some people it's a matter of moving on to a different area, doing something different for a while to, maybe recenter themselves.
Yeah.
And for the most part, most people come to grips with it.
Yeah.
But it can be enough that they could start having some mental health issues that kind of mirror depression, where they start dealing with issues of anxiety and maybe appetite issues and feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness, that sort of stuff. And then at that point in time, maybe medication might be the answer. I'm not 100%. America wants magic by mouth, right? They want.
Right.
Oh, I like that.
Give me a pill
Give me a
and fix
pill
it.
and I'm fixed, right? But the thing about it is that in your life there are certain stressors. Everybody has them. Everybody, between their genetics and the way they were raised, has a threshold.
Right.
And what happens is that when the stress goes above the threshold, then that's when symptoms start, right? And you start having problems. Well, the only thing that the medication does is it just raises the threshold, but it doesn't change the problems. Right? So you can medication
Gotcha.
raise that threshold. And
Right.
maybe it's enough to raise it above where your problems are and you
Right.
start feeling better
Right.
about things. But the way to work through it is therapy. It's like peanut butter and jelly to me. It's like if you're going to take antidepressants, you need to have a therapist.
Right.
Because you got to sort through that stuff. You've got to be able to work
very
your way
true.
through your problems, not just take a pill to
You're masking the
mask
problem.
the problems.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That
And I
makes
think
sense.
moral injury probably fits in the same boat, that if it's to the point where the stress has exceeded that threshold and you need medication, therapy would probably be, just as effective to help. Well, the combination of the two is always more effective. But
Now, and I'm just thinking, I don't know the answer to this, but let's say you had folks, because COVID was an interesting animal, and I've read up on this. I mean, COVID can kind of lower those thresholds from what I understand as well in certain instances. I mean, there's long-term effect to COVID, and I'm wondering if you had a CRNA or a nurse who might have gotten COVID, who before their threshold was up here, and now their threshold, potentially is lowered a little bit. And I know they don't know all this yet, but it seems to me that I've read some stuff about that. Do you know anything about that?
They have actually long-haul COVID clinics in certain medical centers and larger hospitals and academic centers where they're just really beginning to understand what long-haul COVID's about. There are people who, like there was a guy that had tinnitus that was so bad after COVID that wouldn't go away that he ended up ending his life because he just couldn't take it anymore.
Oh, wow.
And then my wife works with a nurse who had COVID early on, and a year or more after she recovered from it, they can't explain why she's tachycardic all the time. Why her heart rate? I mean, if she gets up just to walk across the room, her heart rate's 140, and she never had that problem before COVID. And and she starts having palpitations and stuff. So then you say to yourself, well, that's kind of weird. Is that a long-term COVID,
Right.
long-haul COVID issue, or whatever? So yeah, I think that we really don't even understand a
Right.
lot of the long-term effects of COVID.
No.
So
Well, it's going to take us a while to understand the long-term effects, I would think, on the healthcare providers. I mean, we're still in it. It's just not, people are not dying the way
Right.
that they died
right.
in the
And
beginning.
I think that, I had it a month ago, 6 weeks probably ago. Just was dumb. I went to a baseball game, and the guy behind me was coughing. It was an indoor stadium in St. Petersburg. And sure enough, a couple days later, I start with symptoms, check myself positive. But fortunately, the Paxlovid, which is the combo antiviral, had that right away from my nurse practitioner that I get my primary care from. And it really was not anywhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was more like just a cold, just like having a cold. But, I still had a lot of anxiety about it because, I'm got comorbidities and things, and they're worried about all that. But yeah, I think that it's the footprint of COVID has changed a lot. I think that, not as many people are dying, although still there was, I heard something the other day, it was about like 300 or 400 people a day still dying from COVID. But I don't think it's as much with vaccinations and with the antivirals and things that are out there. But still, there's, a lot of people out there who are suffering with long-term effects still. So.
And we're going to have healthcare workers with moral injury from it.
Yeah.
It's there. It's definitely out there. There are a lot of people that have a lot of issues with the way care was rationed and managed during COVID, and them making decisions with families to withdraw care before someone actually had expired, and just it's like, can you imagine, you do all this for someone, you're a nurse, you're a bedside nurse or a CRNA, you've spent 12 hours a day for how many days taking care of this person, trying to keep them, and the next thing you know, they're going to just extubate them, turn the monitor off, and walk out of the room,
Wow.
or whatever,
Right.
That, you could imagine how that would affect you, especially if you felt that there was still more that could be done. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much moral injury in a nutshell.
And just not doing everything possible to save that person, right. That has to weigh on you, and it sounds, it does sound very close to, like you said, PTSD, although for an internal reason instead of an external reason, which is very interesting here. So,
wow. So you can raise the threshold with antidepressants, is what I heard you say earlier. So you can treat this, but you're really not.
Well,
give me.
I'm not anti-antidepressants.
Sure,
I think they serve a purpose, and I think that a lot of people get great relief from them. My thing is that I also encourage them to see a therapist. And the thing about therapy is, rarely, if ever, do you hit the nail on the head with the first therapist you visit, because a lot of times it's a matter of you finding that person that you click with.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right. And so what I hear from people all the time is, I went, it was terrible, I'm not going back. And it's like, well, you just went to, you just didn't hit it off. You need to try somebody else.
Got to kiss a lot of frogs,
Right. And so no, medication can certainly help symptoms.
Today's show is brought to you by the folks at CRNA Financial Planning, an independent consulting firm that offers financial planning services exclusively to CRNAs and their families. From planning for a child's future college expenses to building a predictable income stream in retirement, the firm is committed to offering you comprehensive financial services, customized to fit your unique needs and objectives. If you have questions about your financial future, get them answered. Call the team at 855-304-3748. That's 855-304-3748. Or go online to crnafinancialplanning.com.
So Jerry, I'm just kind of sitting here thinking. So if you're a CRNA, you're doing this case, or you're a nurse, whatever, in this scenario, and you know that you're being told to do something against your morals. Could that person say, "Hey, I can't do this because it's against my moral code here. This is not something, if you want somebody else to do it, that's fine." Could they step away out of that situation? Is that acceptable? Or, is that something that you could, I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking through this, because I know if I'm in that situation, somebody said, "Hey, you need to shoot Sharon in the head right now." I'd say, well, Pierce might, but I'm not. But you know what I'm saying. It would be, I would say, no, I couldn't do that.
Let's think about this in another context, because there are some people who have difficulty anesthetizing someone for an abortion, let's say.
There you go. Yeah. That's kind of the same thing. Yeah.
I think within the community, people shuffle that around and say, okay, I'm not okay with this.
Right.
And will you do this case? And I'll give you an example. I was asked to go do a C-section right after I went back to work at the hospital, and we knew it was going to be a bad baby. And Emma had just died. And so I asked another CRNA, I said, I'm just not ready.
Not at the place.
Not ready to see a bad baby right now. Will you go do this C-section for me, and I'll take over your room? So I think CRNAs are really getting more attuned to that, whereas used to, even with second victim, if you had a bad outcome or a bad case, they'd be like, you got 2 minutes, go get your next
get it
case
together and go get the next one
get
going.
them in the room. But now, I think CRNAs, the first level is awareness. They're
Right.
becoming aware.
Talking more
and
about it.
Exactly. And so Jerry had a bad case. I would come in and say, you know what, Jerry, why don't you just go ahead and go home today, and I'll finish up your room for you.
Right.
Whereas I do remember a bad case whenever you were a student where you had that aspiration and you were in the room doing the next case after that one.
They just told me shake it
They're
off.
like, suck it
Just
up,
keep
you know,
going.
buttercup.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing that I was just thinking, the awareness side of it and talking about it and making the community aware that, you know what, this is an acceptable practice, that if it doesn't fit your moral. And Jerry, I don't know, do you talk to students about these kind of things?
Oh,
I mean,
very good question.
Yeah.
I think we're much more in tune with wellness for our students now than we were, but we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
We really do have a long way to go. I think that wellness activities, team building activities, that sort of stuff that we do with students, that was not something that was really even thought about when we were students.
Right.
I think it helps a lot. I think it helps with, and then being in tune with the fact that they're adult learners and then with adult problems.
Yeah.
And adult issues, and sometimes families and a lot of distractions. We were kind of not really given that opportunity to pull that card and say, hey, listen, I have a family problem, I have an issue. My wife broke her arm in our senior year of anesthesia school, and I was going to quit because I needed to obviously feed my family.
Right.
So things happen, and so,
Yeah.
but I think we're much better. And the resources on the health and wellness side and the AANA.com website are pretty good. I mean, it's a lot of stuff there, to help, and a lot of information to help maybe work your way through some of the issues, but also referrals, that sort of stuff that you can. And so I think we're better. I think we still got a long way to go when it comes to wellness of our members, because it's a very stressful situation.
Absolutely.
Profession.
Well,
But you guys compartmentalize it so
very well.
Because, I think if I had to go in and do what you guys did every day, I don't think I could do it. I mean, maybe I could if I was trained, but I think about, what you guys actually do. It's so funny, our staff at the office will call our clients or somebody, and they'll pick up the phone and they're in the OR and they'll go, Karen or somebody will come back and go, oh my God, they were in the middle of a case. I could hear the machines beeping and they're talking to me on the phone. And I'm thinking, don't answer the phone. You got to take care of it. I mean, because there's so much responsibility to that,
Well, maybe there's little doses, micro dosing of moral distress. And what I'm thinking about is whenever you're in the GI suite and you're doing a colonoscopy on a 96-year-old that darn good and well that nothing you're going to find in their colon. Number one, you're not going to fix it if you find it.
Right. Yeah, no. Why even put them
So what are
through
we
it?
doing here?
And number two, what if you perf them? Then you've created a whole set of problems there. So why are we doing this in the beginning? So I think that there's what is it, Mike? It's micro. It's microaggressions if it's little. So we're doing micro dosing of moral injury, because sometimes it is kind of hard to hold your tongue whenever you're standing there and there's
And
this
surgeon
one
wants
place.
to do something on someone who it's not a good idea.
I've worked at one place, and I swear to God, I've checked for a pulse on some of these people because I thought they were dead when they brought them in there, and we're putting a peg tube in them or something.
Right.
So I think we have we're slowly inoculated little by little with moral injury that we
Because
never
name a CRNA
address.
that hasn't done a case in their lifetime where they said, "What are we doing here?
Oh,
Why are we
yes,
doing this?"
yes, and we all have
This
one
is-
in our head that we
Right.
will
Oh, yeah.
never,
Oh, yeah.
ever forget.
Right. And
I
and
have
that goes
one.
against your moral compass too. So that you're right. You might be microdosing moral injury and not even realize it because you're doing things for people that is in your mind is not the right thing for that person.
Well, I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with COVID because I was office based and we didn't work. But even still, once I went back to work in the hospital, we went up to intubate some of these COVID patients, and we had one lady who was a no code, and her daughters talked her into us intubating her.
And so you knew that wasn't the right thing. And
I knew it wasn't the right.
Right.
She died 6 days later, and those last 6 days were awful days.
And alone.
Awful days.
Just to think, to me, it's thinking of all the people that died alone.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
That's the hard part for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jerry, as we kind of wrap this one up, anything you want to conclude on or tell our listeners today?
No, just that to know that there's help out there and that there are resources out there if you are suffering with any issues of moral injury, PTSD, that sort of stuff that are COVID related. That I would encourage members to go to aana.com and look at the health and wellness information that's there, referrals, that sort of thing if you need it, numbers you can call if you need help. And take care of yourself. It's one of the things that we're not as good at doing as we should be.
Yep.
But taking care of ourselves is really important because our mental health, you have to be in the right place mentally to do the right thing for people in the operating room. You can't be distracted. You can't be, internally preoccupied with issues or problems because you're not doing your best for the people you're taking care of.
Absolutely. Well, Jerry, thank you. Thank you for all your hard work you've done for CRNAs, and thank you for being on the show today. It's always a pleasure to see you. And Sharon, I think it's a wrap.
I think so.
Yeah, we want to tell our listeners thank you for listening to us. And if they want to help us grow, Sharon, how can they help us grow?
Well, the number one way to help us grow is by leaving us a review, but making it
positive. We all know there's enough negativity in this world.
Absolutely. Tell all your friends, post it on social media that you love us. We're in the top 50 medical podcasts in the country, and we are on our way to number
one, just like we are in the CRNA community. We're the number one podcast in the CRNA community, and we want to be number one overall, don't we?
Absolutely. But we just want to thank our listeners. We wouldn't be able to say these things if it wasn't for all of our listeners out there. We love you too.
Absolutely. All right. Until next time.
It's a wrap.
Have you thought about what would happen if you weren't able to work for 2 or 3 years? On average, 25% of people will file a disability claim, and most of us aren't prepared for that loss of income. Every CRNA needs to protect their biggest asset, yourself, and your ability to earn with a disability insurance policy. We recommend contacting Robert Smith, a master disability insurance specialist with more than 30 years of experience and 1,800 CRNA clients, to find the coverage that fits you best. The best way to do that is to send him an email at rsmithjr@financialguide.com. That's rsmithjr@financialguide.com, or call him at 504-394-6557. Beyond the Mask is made possible by the team at CRNA Financial Planning. With almost 2 decades of experience, the firm guides CRNAs through the complexities of investing and financial planning. Schedule a free consultation today by calling 855-304-3748 or go online to crnafinancialplanning.com.
Hi, this is Jackie Rolls, President of the International Federation of Nurse Anesthetists and President and founder of Our Hearts, Your Hands, a global anesthesia support community that takes donations to allow nurse anesthetists in low and middle income countries to go to educational programs, buy equipment, or textbooks. Your donations are tax deductible, and we would appreciate your support.
OSA EMR is a free anesthesia EMR developed by CRNAs that you can download and use on an iPad. Our nonprofit mission is to make sure that solo and small practice CRNAs can digitally record their anesthetics. To learn more, visit osaemr.com to download and consider donating to our cause. Remember, for CRNAs, data is destiny.
Be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere you like to listen to shows. Also be sure to check out BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. Each episode is posted there with a corresponding blog post, and we timestamp important parts of the episode to help you quickly get to the content you're looking for. Also check out the special series section on the site. You can follow along and catch up on the CRNA History Series, episodes specifically about political conversations in the industry, or try the CRNA Personal Finance Series. It's all on BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. And if you have a question for the show or want to be a guest, or even suggest a particular topic, fill out the contact form on the site or send an email directly to us at info@BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. And lastly, let's take the conversation social. Check out our Beyond the Mask podcast Facebook page and Facebook group.